What's the most out of touch thing you've heard a person say? Why are you still living at home at 23? Just buy a house, coming from someone whose parents bought her a house. Why don't you live on disability? As a response to disabled people complaining about local government cutting back programs designed for making gainful employment accessible. I work with disabled adults. This is a bigger problem than most people realize. He told me as long as you're dating someone better looking than you, you're going to have to get used to me being hit on or having something on the side. You're going to have to date an ugly guy for that loyalty shit. Of all the insanity of this quote, the thing that gets me is the casual equating of something that cannot be controlled, me being hit on, with the opposite, me having someone on the side. It's like, look, as long as we live in an area with a lot of flowers, sometimes I'm going to get allergies or murder people. I mean, someone has to push up the daisies. I don't understand why you bother renting an apartment. Just buy a house. My dad, who hadn't purchased a house since 1993. My advice to my younger colleagues is to buy a house in the year 2000, like I did. They don't seem to appreciate it. Kids these days. Edit, also more free advice, buy Apple stock in the 1980s. Trust me on this. I bought my house in 2016 in Western Pa before housing prices started skyrocketing here. My house has had a 60% increase in value in those 6 years. If I sold, I'd get more money back than what I paid in mortgage payments the past 6 years. Even more absurd, per Zillow, my house has increased in value $6,500 plus in the last 30 days. Recently got a new job that paid double what I used to make. When I resigned, my former boss told me money isn't everything, lol. I was only making minimum wage before. As a friend once said, money can't buy happiness, but I find that it makes misery so much more comfortable. I don't know why you would go to a community college when you can go to a university. Said by a high school guidance counselor giving a lecture on college admissions essays and applications in my senior app English class after I asked naively if Therese anything I had to do for community college. Turns out I had other classmates in the same boat who wanted to know too but felt too embarrassed to ask. Anyways, I went to community college to get my prerequisites out of the way and got my associate's degree. Then transferred into university for a competitive nursing program. I saved money from those first 2 years in community college, didn't get a loan until I got into uni. Duck that guidance counselor. Such bad advice. I went to a school in a wealthy area and the guidance counselor would tell us to go to community college, get straight A's and an automatic acceptance into the local Ivy League school. If you can get the grades, it really is the best call financially. That's my plan currently. Partly for the above, it's cheaper for when I want to go to a 4-year, but also because I'm not 100% sure that I'm going to go down the education route, and I don't want to get into an expensive college just to drop out with debt. The company owes you nothing, you owe the company everything. My boss after I worked for 4 years in the company. I used to work for a guy who owned a temporary employment agency. I once watched him berate his two $7 an hour receptionists because his monthly income from the business had dropped from $40,000 to $25,000. And they had nothing whatsoever to do with how much money the business made, they were ducking receptionists. Temp agencies are the worst. They benefit the companies they work with and themselves. The employees get ducked by both. I was telling my boss how proud I was my husband got a new job, he's legally blind, and she proceeds to tell me that she wishes she had a disability so she could just get handed a job. Had to walk away. F4 that one. Who is your chocolatier? Okay, I need to know the context for this one, if you'd care to share it. I was at an open house looking for a new property and 2 women were discussing their favorite restaurants. One asked this question and I remembered that some people just live such different lives. Wow. Imagine being able to drop that line unironically with a straight face. You're right, some people just live exceedingly different lives than the rest of us. They were indeed having a very normal conversation for them because the other woman started listing the pros and cons of different chocolatiers. I felt like a member of the peasant class overhearing their conversation. Because you really were. I was working at a school for the kids of the 1% and we were discussing what a millionaire was. One example I gave was owning property or assets worth $1 million or over, and the kid replied, "Oh, so everyone is a millionaire then?" Everyone, all of the classmates. Maybe not the teacher. Had a friend in dental school who grew up in the rich suburbs north of Detroit. We were talking about traveling. She was going to Thailand for spring break, and she said it'd be surprised if most people hadn't traveled to at least 20 countries. I told her it'd be surprised if most people had ever left the US at all. Edit, for all those wondering, she is from Bloomfield Hills. To be rich enough to travel to at least 20 countries. My dad just died about a month ago. My company gave me 4 days unpaid off. I was really close to my father, so this was hard for me to deal with. My paycheck was enough to pay bills, but I had to buy my groceries on credit card to get by. My boss's brother-in-law died the following week. All he talks about is how hard this is on his wife. Between the stress of her brother dying, and the Reno on their $1 million cabin, he's taking his whole family to Hawaii for 10 days this month to try to deal with their grief. Meanwhile, I'm pricing urns out on Amazon to try to save money, trying to sell my dad's tools to help my mom, working full-time and taking care of a toddler. If you can't afford gas, buy an electric vehicle. Had a millionaire tell me it was so great that even though we could all be making much more than we were at our nonprofit, we stayed for the kids because who needs money when your job is rewarding? Plot twist, he was a board member who controlled our salaries. I was barely making enough to scrape by. Edit, whoa, this blew up lol. I know there is a lot of hate for nonprofits here, but I do want to clarify that for the most part I truly love the people and kids I worked with, and the organization itself was a community staple that did a lot of good with the minimal funds we had. And we did have some awesome board members. But others were a bit out of touch, this being the worst example, haha. That sentiment is everywhere in nonprofits, sadly. Someone I know sadly always brags about her $500K flat, then tries to crowdfund for her cat's bills. Aren't you a bit too old to have a grandma? A neighbor when I told her my grandma just passed away. Wish I could have seen her face if you had said, well, as of yesterday I guess I am. I actually said, well, I don't have one anymore, and she didn't really react. Naturally I'm still upset, it still hurts, and this woman still doesn't get it. I avoid her now. Africa is a country. In front of an Ethiopian who insisted that Africa is a continent. This and those puzzled people who meet African immigrants and wonder if they are hungry, thirsty, or are surprised and impressed that they know what civilization is. It's interesting how many people think that all of sub-Saharan Africa is just collections of thatched huts filled with fly-covered, pot-bellied children and half-naked, floppy-breasted women. Maybe some guys with spears and bones in their noses standing off to the side. Show such people the skyline of Lagos or Nairobi and they'll be trying to figure out which state or European country they're looking at. Kim Kardashian being on a high horse saying women need to get up and go work to survive. She got famous for getting ducked on video. Sigh. Anytime someone says why did they throw that away? It could have been donated to a homeless person. When referring to extremely expired or broken items. Edit to fix typo. While cleaning out my parents' house before they moved, I emptied their fridge and pantry and separated out the expired stuff. My dad went through and gathered most of the food into a donation box. And then scooped in all the expired food as well. Some of this stuff was years expired and even open. My partner and I kept trying to remove it, and eventually it came down to an argument where my dad insisted that the homeless would take whatever they could get. My dad had never had the experience of going hungry, while my partner had volunteered at food banks in the past. He was pissed that my dad was treating homeless people as less than human and insisting they should be grateful to eat his garbage. Once my parents had left, I donated the expired food to the garbage can. If my dad was so concerned about wasting it, he should have either used it or donated it years ago when it was still safe to eat. I briefly went hungry for a few months after escaping domestic violence. I have a job and eat well now, and I definitely threw out expired food. Can't risk getting sick while poor with the way the US healthcare system is. Starvation takes a good month or two to kill you. Food poisoning is not nearly as forgiving.